My name is Abraham Stillman, and I'm interviewing the Honorable Carolyn Maloney today, who served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 30 years in New York City districts. Ms. Maloney is now the president of the New York chapter of the National Organization for Women and the founder of signforera.org. She is leading the federal effort to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Ms. Maloney, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for being interested in women's equality and rights. Thank you.
I want to start by exploring the background of your work. What is the Equal Rights Amendment?
The Equal Rights Amendment was introduced at Seneca Falls in the Presbyterian Church by Alice Paul. She was a relative of my late husband, Clifton Harlan Wells Maloney. His grandmother was her first cousin. But I've been involved in equal rights long before I even met my future husband, God bless him. And it is very simple. It merely says that equality of rights shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. That's Section 1. Section 2 allows the government to implement laws to protect women from being discriminated against. Those are the two parts in the Constitution, and then it would be enforced in 2 years. So this is, the Equal Rights Amendment is very simple. You would think it would be like having a glass of water, yet it has been a struggle for 101 years for women trying to get it in the Constitution. When we got the right to vote, the leaders of that effort said, we will then do the Equal Rights Amendment and women will have the right to vote and will be protected from discrimination. And it'll be easy to pass. It hasn't been easy to pass. Personally, I see it as a financial argument. One of the things that it would enforce, it would give the ability to enforce equal pay for equal work. Mm-hmm. And it would give women the right to sue because they would be part of the Constitution to enforce their rights and to protect themselves from sexual violence. One of the most outrageous cases was a Broncalla case, and we had passed the Violence Against Women Act, which gave a right to sue in cases of rape and sexual violence. And it was thrown out on a technicality that women are not in the Constitution. So just those two reasons to allow women to take action against sexual violence and to enforce equal pay for equal work. But it is so important. It would be like an insurance policy, like a wall to protect women from any effort to take away their rights. The Dobbs decision that came out erasing 49 years of precedent. My two daughters now have less rights than what I had when I was your age or their age now. And simply put, if you can erase a woman's right to choose, then you can erase any right. And the only way to protect women is to get the protection of their rights and to protect them from being discriminated against in the Constitution. Personally, I can't think of anything more discriminatory than telling a woman what she can and cannot do with her own body. How outrageous. And it would, particularly in terms of their health, their own reproductive health, and planning their children and their families, and certainly having exceptions for rape, incest, and other violent things that may happen to women for abortion rights. So there's so many reasons that it's so important, but I would say the opposition comes from mainly economic reasons.
Right.
And a desire to keep women down and back. I know that when we had the first Equal Rights Amendment that passed in the 70s, it was the insurance companies that came in and halted the movement and financed the movement against it because insurance policies discriminated against women at that time. They would charge much, much more for women because they have children, and they just charged more, like 4 or 5 times more for a woman's life insurance policy and health insurance policies than they did men. One of the great things in the Obamacare legislation is that it demanded that men and women be treated equally in their health care and in insurance for them.
Mhm.
So that was a big step forward for passage, really, of the Equal Rights Amendment.
So what specifically will be on the ballot this November?
This November, there will be a state ERA, which is very expansive, and there will be but that is very different from the federal one. In my 30 years in Congress, one of my main goals was to pass and ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. I passed 30 bills, 15 of them had presidential bill signings, which are reserved for consequential pieces of legislation. But I never could pass the Equal Rights Amendment. So when I wasn't returning to Congress, I decided that I would spend full time working on getting the Equal Rights Amendment recognized as ratified. First, I worked with all the women's groups, and we worked with constitutional scholars, and we did a bill that says, and they all said if this happens, then it could be ratified and recognized as ratified and in the Constitution. The bill removes the arbitrary time limit, and the bill recognizes the ERA as ratified, having met all of the requirements of Article 5 of the Constitution. Number one, 2/3 votes in the House and Senate, and secondly, it had to be ratified by 38 states. What happened is they went out and immediately 35 states ratified it, but the time limit that they added, an arbitrary time limit at the last minute, gave only 7 years, and they extended it to 10 years. They still did not meet that. But the constitutional scholars said that Congress could add a time limit, Congress can remove it, which is what our bill does. And President Biden has said, if we pass this bill, a sense of Congress, and removing the time limit, then he will take the necessary steps to instruct the archivist to put it in the Constitution. So that's what our goal is, and we have never been closer. We need 218 votes to do a motion to discharge, which goes around the leadership and moves the bill to the floor for a vote. This is how the original Equal Rights Amendment passed with Martha Griffiths. It was under a Democratic controlled House, and they were opposed to the Equal Rights Amendment. She worked with Gerald Ford, who was then the minority leader, to get the Democratic and Republican votes together in a bipartisan way that moved it to the floor for a vote. So that's the process that we're working on now.
Cool. So you did touch on this, but what is the importance for this coming election cycle to get the ERA passed? How is it especially important now?
Because it's been 101 years and it's too long. And I would say that in this Congress, it's a jump ball, because
Right.
there's been a lot of things that happened. First of all, there's been a revolving door of Republican speakers. It took them 13 votes to get a speaker, so they're basically in chaos. And when there's chaos, there's opportunity. And there's the highest number of Republican resignation in years. And one Republican House member was even expelled, Santos, and several Democratic deaths. And so once you sign, once you get to 218, it locks in. And so we've got 214 signatures. There was another death. There's another election, which looks like it's a Democratic district, so it'll get us to 215. Then we only need 3 Republicans. Once you get to 218, it locks in, and you can't get on or off, and it would force a vote on the floor. So we can get it done. It's been 101 years. This is the closest we've been. It only takes 3 more votes to do it. So why not do it now? What are we waiting for? We've been waiting for 101 years for just basic equality treatment. So that's what we need to do. We can do it now, and that's what we're working on.
That's amazing. So what could you describe the controversy surrounding passing the Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, there's not much controversy, because when I left Congress, I did a petition drive, and the petition drive was to Leader Schumer to have a vote in the Senate, since we controlled the Senate, so we could have a vote on the Equal Rights Amendment. So I wanted him to have a vote before Congress ended. And we got everybody to sign, we got all this activity. And we were threatening to sleep out on the steps of the Capitol. It was freezing cold, it was December. I'm glad we didn't have to, I'd probably be dead now or sick. Anyway, he promised us that he would have a vote in the beginning of the Congress. So we had a meeting here at Hunter College. He was the first one to sign the petition. At Hunter College, we started a national petition drive to have recognize the Equal Rights Amendment as ratified. And this is what our legislation says. It says, I strongly support the Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution as the 28th Amendment. The equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. The ERA passed the Congress by the needed 2/3 vote in the United States House and Senate and by the legislature of the needed 38 votes. The two requirements of Article 5 have been done. Congress must immediately recognize the Equal Rights Amendment and pass the following United States House and Senate resolutions. For the first time, we have the same resolution in the House and the Senate. And this is what it says. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States and Congress assembled, that notwithstanding time limit contained in the House Joint Resolution 208, the 92nd Congress has agreed to in the Senate on March 22nd, 1972, the article of amendment proposed to the states and in that joint resolution is valid to all interests and purposes as part of the Constitution. The first signature is Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Senate. The second signature is Gloria Steinem, a great feminist leader. And the third is Carolyn Maloney, who started this whole situation. We now have over 120 signatures, but this is not a normal petition drive. It's a very important one. This is an update of this. It's now 120, but this was 96,000. It breaks down by state who signed, and it breaks down by congressional district who signed. We now have 120,000. We need to get 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, but then we are able to write the Congress people and tell them that in the cases of California, 4,000 of their residents at that time supported. It's now many more. The case of New York, over 3,000, almost 4,000 have signed the petition, and let them know that their constituents want women to have equal rights. Mm-hmm. We also started a drive called Mayors for the Equal Rights Amendment, and we have mayors from California to New York that have signed it. And we are leaving on a bus to go around New York State to get the hopefully next 3 votes for the Equal Rights Amendment and finally have this protection for women. It's so important because of the Supreme Court decisions that have come out rolling back a woman's right to choose. The Morrison decision, which was the Brancala decision on the Violence Against Women Act, mm-hmm. which took away the right to sue. The Dobbs decision, which took away a woman's right to have an abortion, which is overturning 49 years of precedent. But also the Chevron decision that has come out that says that any regulations that have been put out can be denied and rolled back and changed.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, what is your response to anti-Equal Rights Amendment advocates, including Ed Cox, the head of the New York State Republican Party, who say that the Equal Rights Amendment is not necessary to protect abortion rights?
Well, the Equal Rights Amendment is much broader than just abortion rights. It's equality. It basically protects women from discrimination, so
right.
that you can't. The entire time I was in Congress, I used to do an annual report on pay disparity, and for 30 years it hasn't changed. It's basically 80 cents to the dollar for women. With an Equal Rights Amendment, you could enforce equal pay for equal work. I would say it would end discrimination. Personally, I can't see anything more discriminatory than telling a woman what she can and cannot do with her own body. I would say that it's really undemocratic and completely unfair.
Mm-hmm.
And we are the only Western democracy that does not have an equal rights amendment in our Constitution. And in fact, the whole wave of the world is going to more rights and respect for women. And I would say the vote in Ireland on abortion rights, the vote in Argentina on abortion rights, all of these countries are moving towards more protections and respect for women. Our country's going in the opposite direction. So it's a much broader issue than abortion. But ultimately, the Constitution says under Article 5 that it is the Congress that can initiate legislation. You have to remember our founding fathers and mothers were fighting a king. They didn't want a powerful king or president. So the president can't pass legislation. He can recommend it. And a lot of times people listen to his ideas or her ideas because they've been elected, but only Congress can initiate it. The executive branch can implement what Congress has done. Our educational system, our health system, they are implementing it, but it was written by Congress. And then, of course, our courts interpret. Mm-hmm. Since this is, to me, I think equal rights is sort of very American. It's sort of an American value and principle that people should be treated fairly and equally and have the same opportunities. Why should half of our population be held back and told they're not equal and that you can't do this or you can't do that? And I would say that how can we compete and win in a world economy if we're not using the best abilities from all of our citizens, including women, and holding them back and saying they're not equal or that they can't do this or can't do that is not fair to them, but it also hurts their families, their spouses, and I would say the whole country. So ultimately, once this is recognized as ratified, it will go then to the courts to be interpreted. So it would be up to the courts to interpret whether or not it is covered by the Equal Rights Amendment ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how has your work with the National Organization for Women and as the founder of signforERA.org, how have you worked to address this?
Well, we have started several initiatives. One is the Sign for the ERA campaign, which is a national petition drive. The Mayors for the ERA, and we have a bus tour leaving. So those are three that have been organized with NOW and other women's organizations in support of the Equal Rights Amendment. The National Organization for Women is the largest women's organization that is dedicated to empowering women. It grew out of the 1970s Betty Friedan and Shirley Chisholm and Patricia Schroeder and really that whole effort of women working to empower women candidates. I know when I first ran for office, I ran against a very powerful incumbent Republican congressman. He had been in Congress for 15 years. He outspit me 4-1. No one thought I could win. And the only organization that endorsed me was NOW. I was so appreciative, even though I had been a member of the city council for 10 years and had passed legislation and done all kinds of important things to help the district and the city that I represented or was running to represent. So they often endorse and help women candidates so that they can have a seat at the table. As Shirley Chisholm famously said, our founding document had no founding, they did not have any founding African Americans, and they didn't have any founding women, which is a sad situation. They should be part of our country and part of our Constitution, but we can correct that with the Equal Rights Amendment by having women put into the Constitution and protecting their rights and opportunities to contribute. to the best of their ability to our country.
So since the Alice Paul Amendment was first proposed in 1923 and has since been passed by Congress in 1972, can you describe why the impetus for passing the amendment has not been there? And can you also describe if you've seen the national sentiment shifting?
Oh, the national sentiment has definitely shifted. Polling shows that when it passed in the 70s, it was roughly 60% support for it. Now it's 80%. It's through the roof with Democrats, like 88%. You don't see things poll like that. And with Republicans, it's now at 66%. It's more like 70% with Republican women and 60% with Republican men. So the amount of support, I don't know any other issue in America that has the support of the public that is as strong. I believe that the opposition to it is economic. If you can pay someone so much less, then that there was an effort by insurance companies, as I said, to stop it. And for some reason, I don't understand why. There are many Republicans. The Alice Paul was a Republican. She was a Quaker woman. Many of the first women's leaders came out of the abolitionist movement, and many of them were Quakers because it taught equality of all people, equality of African Americans with other Americans, the equality of men with women. And so their religion taught equality, so all of their leaders, practically all of them, it's interesting, were Quakers, as Alice Paul was. She was a Quaker. And many of them were Republicans. Her uncle was a Republican assemblyman from Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And as I said, Betty Ford was the co-chair for the ERA movement back in 1973. And he produced the votes from the Republican side to get it to the floor for the vote. I say that it should be a bipartisan. It should be something that every American supports because it's equality and opportunity, one of the values. Our Constitution says that all men are created equal. This would include that all men and women are created equal.
Yeah, so that is exactly what my next question is, which is what is the practical implication of the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment for New York State and the nation as a whole?
Well, I can specifically talk for the nation. I would say that in my years of Congress, and I was the first woman to chair the Joint Economic Committee, the first to chair the Government Oversight and Reform Committee, the 18th woman in history to chair a committee. And I would say that the importance of it, as you say, or what did you say? What was the question?
So the question was just what is the practical implication?
Oh, the practical. It is far-reaching, and I would say that a quarter of my time I've spent in Congress has been defending what we already have. There's a constant effort to roll back Title VII, equality of treatment of women in employment. A tremendous effort to roll back Title IX, which is equality of treatment in education, which includes sports. And they do it many ways. They put out a constitutional amendment. They put out legislation. They put out executive orders. And they tried many ways to roll back Title IX, equality of treatment in sports. They even did an executive order that said that schools on their first day of school could have a survey of women, not men, women, asking them if they wanted sports or not. And if they didn't fill it out, then you didn't have to provide sports. We finally had that overturned. Most schools would not even enforce the executive order because they thought it was unfair. But I'm using this as an example. And I say to you, you're going back to school soon. If somebody gave you a survey your first day of school, I wouldn't sign it. I'm getting back to school. So it was a a way to try to roll back women's rights. And I had two daughters that were very, very good athletes. And my late husband said one time, he said, "How are they such good athletes? Because you weren't a good athlete and I wasn't a good athlete." And I said, "How do you know I wasn't a good athlete? I never had the opportunity to play sports. There were no sports for women in public school when I went to public school." So the impact of these laws that women have struggled for, whether it's pension fairness, pay fairness, employment fairness, education fairness, you name it, all of these areas, the protection would not be there. And as they have rolled back a woman's right to choose, they then could go and roll back Title VII, Title IX, all of these equality and fairness bills that generations of women have worked. And like-minded men, we could not have passed it without men, because men were the majority, and are the majority in Congress. None of these bills protecting women would have passed without men. So the men and women that have worked for decades to improve the lives of women, it could be rolled back. So it is far-reaching and serious, and that's why I'm so dedicated to seeing that it is recognized as part of the Constitution.
So how can people like me, how can high school students, how can people in small communities such as my community in East Hampton, how can we help the effort to pass the amendment?
Well, all of you will be voting soon, and your parents are voting. And you should look and see whether that representative supports equal rights for women. And if they support them, I would say vote for them. If they don't support them, I would say vote against them. Ultimately, we are a democracy. Our elected officials work for the population. They work for you, they work for me, they work for their neighbors. And what you'll see is that people will come out and they'll say, "Oh, I am for child care, I am for welfare, I am for school lunches that help children," or they'll be for all these other things. But if they're not for equal rights amendment, it's the whole core, it's the heart of our rights, and we should be in the Constitution. Recently, I was flying to the Democratic National Convention, which was last week, and and the planes didn't fly because of the weather. And I was just thinking, I was there for 48 hours trying to get on a flight. And I was thinking, if I had the money, I would put a big sign up in JFK Airport that says, "Welcome to the only country that does not have equal rights in its Constitution that is a Western democracy. Welcome to the great country of America that leaves women out of its Constitution." It's outrageous when you look at it. And the impact is profound in terms of protecting women from discrimination. It would end discrimination. And it's very troubling what is happening right now with an effort to unwind the 14th Amendment was interpreted as protecting women. In Dobbs, they say it doesn't. And they further said that it would not protect LGBTQ rights, and it wouldn't protect this, and it wouldn't protect that. It wouldn't protect access to contraceptives. That was said by one of the justices. So it is a very serious thing. We should take it, we should vote as if our lives depended on it, and we should vote for equality. This should not be a Democratic or a Republican issue. It should be an American issue, and every American should be for equal rights for all of our citizens.
The passion that you have about this is like, it's like glowing out of you, and I really hope that your efforts come to fruition.
Well, I want to thank you for your interest and for your work on this. And nothing is ever accomplished by any one person. It's a combination of many people, and your working on this is helping us pass it. So I want to thank you.
Thank you so much for